Good morning, everybody. Hope you're having a great Friday. My name is Bryan Armentrout with the Food Safety Foundation and joined with my esteemed colleague and friend, Jose Sabal of Sabal Food Safety Consulting. How are you, sir?
I'm very good. Very good. As you can tell, I still have a little bit of rough voice because of a little bit of flu. It was not COVID, but still.
But still, yeah, it's still no fun. What's funny, everybody, is we were talking about today's topic here before we went live, and we were so excited we almost forgot to hit the live button. So today is going to be a really good topic. And if you're new to this, welcome. This is the Food Safety Chat, and every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, where I am, we talk about all subjects food safety. And within this, there's just an amazing plethora of information that we want to share, because one of the things, and Jose believes this as strongly as I do, is that food safety is not a point of competition. And we're all working together for food safety. And when one company fails in the mind of the consumers, it reflects on us all. So we need to work together to bring up the level of food safety. And so part of the ritual that we have here for the morning is to kind of check in and see how everybody's doing and see where in the world you are and how you're doing, and having our drink.
Yep.
Absolutely. Everybody join us for our drink. Wonderful. My Ember mug, my base on my Ember mug quit working. This happened with my wife as well. But there's two little pins that stick up underneath to charge it. And you contact them when they're like, hey, it's not charging, and you send them a picture and they send you a new one. So good customer service with Ember, right? And unfortunately, right, and this is something we see in quality assurance, is people complain when they're not happy, but they don't tell companies when they are happy. So I wanted to give Ember a good job, Ember. Good point. I am in Loveland, Colorado, where if you're not from Colorado, you think that this is spring and you get lulled into a false sense of security, and you would be wrong, because the weather here in this time of year does this. And so right now, currently, Jose, you're not going to like this. It's currently 12 degrees. I think it was 4 degrees overnight. But it's going to get above freezing. It snowed yesterday and the roads were a little slippery. 2 days from now, it's going to be 65 degrees. Go figure.
Well, let me tell you one thing. There is just a very light difference between you and me, because right here in Southeast Florida is 83. It's partially cloudy, but I can see over through my window that is a beautiful sun is out.
Beautiful. And so Alba, so nice of you to join us again. Jill, great to see you. Of course, Renee, my assistant, is on. And if you have any questions, Renee monitors this, and he'll be putting in links for some of the information we're sharing today. Renee does an awesome job. So thank you, my friend, for helping out. Austin is here. Austin is going to be a guest coming up here again on the Food Safety Chat coming up. So make sure and check that out. Austin is amazing. Martin is here. Always good to see Martin. And Donna. Donna. Yes, good to see you. Christy, Kansas City. You look like a new person joining us. So welcome.
Yeah.
What you'll find here is, if you're a new person here setting in on this Food Safety Chat, we're building an amazing community of people who have a strong passion for food safety. And if you're here live, the advantage is amazing, because you can interact and talk with other people. And I know I speak for Jose on this as well too, is good job. Good job on your commitment to food safety. We appreciate that. We all need to be involved. Monica is here. And of course, my friend Helen. Good to see you, Helen. And Wanda and I used to work together. So it's good to see Wanda. Welcome, everyone. So before we went live here, Jose, I put a little picture up in LinkedIn of Karnak from Johnny Carson. Do you remember Karnak? I'm dating myself here, right? But if you're a younger person joining us and you have no idea who Johnny Carson is, Johnny Carson was the king of late night. If you stayed up and watched the news and you weren't tired, you watched Johnny Carson and Ed McMahon, and that was it, right? There was no other people, right? It was Johnny Carson.
It was just them.
And then David Letterman came along later, and we have this explosion of these late night talk shows that we have now. But Johnny Carson started it all. And one of the skits that he used to do was a fortune teller named Karnak the Magnificent. And he would put on this silly hat like there was in the Post, and he would do jokes around predictions. So I saw one when I was pulling up a picture. And so Ed McMahon would send him a card. He would, put the card to his forehead, go, and then he would say something that didn't make any sense. He would say 105. And then he would hand the envelope back to Ed McMahon, open the envelope, and then Ed McMahon would read the contents. And so for that particular joke, it was 105. The age you'll need to be retired to get Social Security under Bill Clinton or something like that. Right? So, and then they go, hey-oh, hey-oh, with the gang there. So a little walk down memory lane. And so for the younger people on the call, I apologize for that. You have no idea what I'm talking about, but trust me, it was funny. It was funny at the time. But one of the things and the topic for today, and so definitely everybody, good morning, Remini. Hopefully I pronounced your name correctly. I'm sure I slaughtered that. Jose, how'd I do on her name? Ramina, I bet. Ramina. Sorry about that, Ramina. My apologies. Yes. So Helen is, even going further back in time, although she's too young for this. But yeah, Jack Parr and Ed Sullivan. That's true. That's true. But at the time, it was only Johnny Carson on the air. Duncan, good morning. Jennifer, good morning to you as well. So one of the good things with being, and the reason why this linkage with this prediction kind of came to mind for today's talk, Jose, is a lot of times in quality, we need to have to predict the future, right?
Yeah.
What are the issues that are going on? What are the things we need to be worried about? So for example, current events in the world right now, Ukraine, of course, right? And who in this group had any clue that sunflowers came from Ukraine and sunflower oil came from Ukraine? And if you're a manufacturer using sunflower oil in your products, you probably have a supply chain issue, right? Predicting these type of things and looking at this and trying to be a step ahead is incredibly valuable. If you're able to show that in your company, that you can help point to trends, right? That's super, super valuable. One of the things that comes to mind, Jose, is when you're looking at quality, right? We always talk about corrective action and preventive action.
Mm-hmm.
Corrective action is nice, but it's already happened. Right? A good example of this is, let's say you put together a monthly quality report for your plant, right? And you're showing your KPIs of your complaint rates and your downtime and your positive hits on your ATP testing or whatever, right?
Yes. That's
all backwards looking. These things have all happened, right? Yes. It's nice to keep everybody up to date, but the harder and actually the more important thing is the preventive, right? Or preventative, right? We've all been trained now to say preventive. And what are those trends that you need to be looking at to keep those things from happening, or at least prepare for them, right? You need to be a detective, right?
And besides that, Bryan, looking for near misses, start looking for near misses, ask people to report near misses, because near miss, you actually do not have a deviation. And whenever you are fixing those things, you are being proactive at that point.
Yep, exactly. No, that's a very, very good point. And before we get too far into the conversation here today, because I'm chomping at the bit like you are, I did want to point out a shout out to our sponsor for today's food safety chat, EAS Consulting Group, led by Tim Lombardo over there in the food group, an amazing society of people over there, experts and consultants and trainers that you can work with to help accelerate and learn from these type of activities, right? Just like we're doing here, if you bring in an expert in a particular area, it's amazing the quantum leaps that you can bring. Yeah. So if you go to easconsultinggroup.com/training, you can check out their training programs that they have. If there's something there that you need that's special, like FSVP or things like that, you can talk with them and they can customize courses for you. And if you put Bryan, that's with a Y, in the checkout for the promo code, 15% off. Bam. Gotta love that. So thank you to EAS. We appreciate your support of food safety and helping to get the message out. So good group of guys over there. And thank you for Renee for posting that. So with recalls, right? So we were looking at this, and so recall, if you follow me on LinkedIn, if you keep a close eye on the things that I post, right, I keep a really, really close eye on recalls. And recalls, Jose, is kind of like the quality report, right? It's backwards looking. These things have happened. And what we can learn from those is really important. But I think even more importantly is where are things going?
So, you know me, Bryan. My first comment is going to be in reference to systems. Believe it or not, I'm not going to talk yet about laws and regulations.
Mm-hmm.
So, systems. What is what is a recall in a food safety system? Is the worst thing that can happen to any company. Okay? And I'm going to explain this simply. And now I'm going to start using the regulations and the law. In the law, the food law, 21 USC 331 prohibited acts. Okay? It says that it is prohibited to any company or any person to put products in the market that are adulteration and misbranding. And remember that the food law in the United States carry criminal consequences. Okay? So with that in mind, if you're recalling, most likely it's because the product contains something that makes that product adulterated. That means that at that point, the person responsible for the product, which is whomever is at the top of the organizational chart of that facility, may go to jail.
Yes.
Okay? That's what we're talking in a recall. Because you know what? It is very similar to when people say, oh, in the United States, we have 1 in 6 Americans getting sick, and then 300,000 are hospitalized, and then 8,000 are dying in a year. I mean, those are numbers. They actually don't mean anything to most of the people. But you know what? Going through these recalls and starting our conversation, we're going to start by saying that a recall is the worst thing that can happen to any company, because there is evidence that even though that your food safety system is supposed to be designed to identify conditions that will adulterate the products and implement controls for that in order to prevent shipping the product being adulterated, the company was not able to achieve that goal. And not only that, the worst part is that no one was able to identify or say something about that product, and the product was shipped.
Or worse, they knew it was adulterated and they shipped it. Phoenix Corporation of America, right?
Yes. I don't want to go there, but yes.
Yep,
let's say that it's accidental.
What's that?
Let's say that it's accidental at this point. Let's say.
Right. And that's why when FDA comes to your facility, one of the first things that they want to figure out is who's the responsible authority. And when it comes to your food safety, that's the PCQI, right? Who is the person signing off on the food safety, right? So if you're in that role, you need to take that really, really seriously, and you need to keep on top of that and understand the heavy responsibility you have in that area, right? And so one of the things that is really important on the management side of things is to remember that responsibility equals authority, right? So if you have a high level of responsibility, you have to have the responsibility and the authority to act on that, right? Because if I'm the PCQI and I don't have the ability to hold product before the food safety checks are done, I'm in big trouble.
And we're now talking about FDA, Bryan. But if you go to FSIS, to the Food Safety Inspection Service of the Department of Agriculture, the HACCP requirements in the regulation in 9 CFR 417, that's a HACCP for meat, poultry, and egg products, says that you must verify those critical control points and anything that is going to be critical, like the sanitation, before you ship the product. So with FSIS, it's a mandatory thing.
Mm-hmm. And it's essentially mandatory now under FDA, right?
I would
because
say so.
You need to have, if you have preventive controls in place, you need to be checking those things before you ship, right? You have 5 days to check those things. So allergens, sanitation, environmental monitoring if you have ready to eat foods, supply chain controls, preventive controls in that area with FSVP, right? FDA is going to look at those all day long if they're coming to look at your plant. Now, part of this is a little background too. Let's back up a little bit here. So we'll refresh with everybody kind of the two main buckets that FDA looks at for inspections, because FDA has announced now that we're coming out of COVID that inspections are going to return. So can you expect a huge uptick in FDA visits? Absolutely, right? They're going to be coming and looking at your facilities. So FDA is divided into districts, and you have a district director who manages the inspectors and these type of things, just like, you know, a director in a food company. And that person has a certain amount of resources available to them. So they'll look at the products and their inspectors and their investigators, I mean, in those areas and figure out where they want to send them. And so they're going to look at high priority things, things that they're concerned with. And then they'll save some of those resources in reserve for an issue that may happen. So part of this now too is what FDA has done is they have remodeled how they do these field work and these field visits, and they've aligned around expertise instead of location. So it used to be if you were in the Northeast District or something like this, and the closest available investigator worked in medical device, he may be coming in to audit a food plant, right? And so that would always cause a little bit of misalignment. And so I think FDA had some, growing pains to realign around the expertise, but I think it was the right move. So the odds are, if you're a dairy plant, you're going to be getting an FDA investigator in there or a contracted visit from a state employee who really understands your processes, right? So they're going to be able to talk shop with you, which is good, right? You want them to be able to understand your process. So with that, FDA kind of breaks it down into two buckets. The first bucket is what they call GMP audits. And this is the basic, we're not really worried about you. We're going to come and see how things are going and look around, right? They're going to observe your GMPs, right? And to your point, Jose, it's kind of all that blocking and tackling, all the things that you should be doing, right? Training your employees, and are people wearing their hair nets, and how do they wash their hands? Do you have hot water, and all these type of things. The next level is what they call a for-cause audit. This is when they're kind of worried about something going on. So they have received complaints from people saying, hey, I ate this product from Bryan's plant and I got sick, right? Mm-hmm. And people can contact FDA directly, right? There's a number they can contact, and they can email them. And so you may get on their radar screen that way. FDA is coming in for a specific reason. And with that, it's much more intense. They're going to be looking at your food safety plan. They're going to be looking at your documentation. They're going to be there longer. Now, part of this is a GMP audit can become a for-cause audit. So if the investigator is walking around and, I don't know, they found huge amounts of evidence for rodent activity, an issue we're going to be talking about here in a bit, they can immediately up that, right? And they're going to call headquarters and be, hey, boss, got a problem here. I'm in the facility and we got, so then they send in the troops, right? And so they send in more investigators and they schedule more time. And now you're really under the spotlight, right? So it's always good to think of those in those terms.
And actually, to support your observations, and this is something that amazed me, because for this chat, Bryan, I did the same thing that, you normally do every year. But I've been doing this same thing since 2016, so I can tell you about what happened in the past. Uh-huh. So this is the first time, and I'm talking about the 2021 data from inspectional observations and the amount of visits that the FDA performed. And this is the first time, Bryan, that I see that 69% of all of the observations that were raised, and yes, I'm talking about the first 20 items in that list, the first 20 observations, okay, were related to food safety and not to the GMPs for the first time since 2016.
Right. And so that everybody understands what's an observation.
Okay, so when the FDA goes and performs a check, an inspection, or an audit in a facility, they are auditing against the regulation that is applicable to that company. Okay, so the regulation becomes the checklist. This is pretty much what FDA and now these auditors working for certification bodies that are accredited by an accreditation body that has a license or something agreement with the FDA to perform regulatory audits, and this is foreign suppliers, but this is exactly the same. The checklist is or are the regulations applicable to those products and processes. And when they're going through that, what they're going to do is, oh, you are not in compliance with 117.10A, disease control, because this and this and this and this and whatever were the observations that they have. That's basically the scope of these observations. Okay, so observations are basically the requirements of the regulation.
Gotcha. So is an observation always on a 483?
If it's a violation that was observed, yes.
Yes.
Otherwise, no.
Right. So to kind of get the general flow for people, right? So you have FDA who comes to visit, right? They do an inspection and they look and they do things. They have observations. Those observations can then be written up as non-compliances and non-conformances on an FDA Form 483. If there's enough evidence that things are really out of compliance and not going well, they can even take the next step, which is a warning letter. Okay,
so look at this, Bryan. If we make a comparison between GFSI and the FDA, a warning letter is kind of for major nonconformities, and a 483 is for minor nonconformities, more or less.
It's a good analogy. I like that. Now, does FDA have to go through all those steps? No. If they go into a facility and they find something that they can immediately go to a warning letter, right? Yes. Or they could go to an injunction and prevent you from manufacturing. Yes. They can shut you down pretty easily now under FSMA. And with warning letters, right, that goes to not just the PCQI, that goes to the most responsible individual in the company, right, the CEO. And under the Park Doctrine, right, which is another whole topic, is FDA is telling that CEO, you are responsible for this. You need to fix it.
Bryan, personally responsible.
Personally responsible, right?
Not the company. It's not a civil thing.
Right. And if you work in food safety or quality assurance and you haven't had that conversation with your CEO, he or she needs to understand that.
Oh, yes.
Right. So that's why this process is so important. So you need to keep up on what's going on. And as Duncan says here as well, right, is past performance, right, as they say in the financial words, does not equal future performance. Predictions are always just that, predictions, right? You're trying to guess how things are going to go. Now, what do we know right now? We know that FDA has been locked out of going to visit locations, right? Had to be a very dire situation for FDA to go and visit a facility. COVID, like, okay, we're going to do as much as we can remotely. We're going to look at FSVP, right? We'll talk about that in a minute. We are going to do other activities that we can't do, and later we'll catch up. Well, guess what? We're at catch-up time.
Yes.
So if you are a quality manager and you're new in that facility and you've been there for 2 or 3 years and you think life is grand and FDA never has visited you, guess what? They may be coming to see you.
And the same way that we have said this in the past, Bryan, any person that is in full compliance with any of the GFSI, it doesn't matter which one, guys, you are not in compliance with the FDA requirements because they are not the same. Now, if you say the facility must be in good building, the building facility, whatever, in good conditions, yes, that's the same. People need to have hand washing, yes, that's the same. And then, there are a lot of things. Maybe more than 50% of the things are the same. But guess what? The rest of the things are not the same. Okay? So the way that you perform a recall under GFSI Yeah, it's extremely similar to the way that the recalls are necessary under the FDA. But there is a lot of things required by the FDA that are not in GFSI.
True.
And this is one of the most important one, reporting to the FDA whenever you have an issue.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Effectiveness checks, the way that they are written in the FDA are not the same in GFSI. And if you want to approve suppliers according to GFSI, that is 180 degrees opposite to approving suppliers according to the FDA.
Yes, very good point. Hopefully everybody caught that. Right? That's really important. And part of this, right, is under FSMA, right? You have registration requirements that are not in GFSI. You have the reportable food registry. You need to have a mechanism for figuring out when you use those, right? Whole nother show we could do on that for sure. Let's see. So Jessica had a question here. So when you find violations that must be corrected, do you take site-specific factors into consideration or make suggestions to meet the intent of the code? And then Jill asked a follow-up question of Jessica. Thank you, Jill. Are you talking about auditing or consulting? So when you find violations that must be corrected, do you take site-specific?
You know what? To Jessica and to Jill, it doesn't matter actually. If you are auditing, consulting, training, it doesn't matter. Because again, any consultant, and like me, I'm going to start talking about how I help my clients. I'm going to start making sure that they are first in compliance with all of the requirements of the FDA. And then if they wish, and if they want to go GFSI, okay, we're going to add whatever is extra in those requirements, but we're going to make sure that the FDA goes first.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay? And for that, what we need to do is to make sure that we understand all of the requirements, regulations, and laws applicable to the product that you guys are manufacturing and the processes that you guys are performing.
Yep, very, very important. I call that the rules of the game, right?
Yeah.
So what rules are you trying to play by? So in this particular example, FDA, right? So let's say 21 CFR 117, right? So the rules under FSMA and the type of things, you need to understand that very, very well, as well or better than the investigator who's coming to visit you. And I'm going to give you now a little thing that I used to do with my quality managers when I would train them. And I would say, when you're sitting down with somebody who's auditing you, FDA, GFSI, it doesn't matter, right? You need to understand the rules of the game.
Yeah.
And you sit down with them and you say, all right, Jose, let's say that you're with FDA. It's like, okay, welcome to our facility, Mr. Sabal. We're very happy to have you here. I think you're going to be very happy with what you find for our food safety programs. As I understand this, you're doing a GMP audit on behalf of FDA. And we'd be more than happy to show you all our programs and systems that are in compliance and within scope for that system. If you have any ideas or suggestions outside of that, we're always looking to improve, and I would love to hear those.
Sounds good to me.
Very non-threatening, very cooperative, because you always want to be cooperative, right?
Yes.
You want to position yourself with anyone who's auditing you as you're on the same side of the table. You're not this, right? You're there to facilitate and to help FDA understand the amazing, wonderful things you do in your facility to make sure that food safety is maintained. Now, this is where the important piece comes with the rules, right? Is if an auditor or an FDA investigator, things like this, start straying outside and asking things that are out of scope. So let's say, for example, they are asking about OSHA compliance, right? Something completely different set of rules, right? You can then ask them and reference back to that opening statement and say, oh, okay, yes. Oh, that's part of OSHA. Oh, well, we can get you with our EH&S manager to answer questions on that, but that's not part of our food safety system.
Food safety. Yeah.
We would love to hear suggestions you have in that area if you have some.
Yeah.
And you smile.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You're controlling.
And you know what? I was reading Jessica's last comment, or not the last one, the previous one. And you know what, Jessica? This is something that I did. I mean, I audited for 9 years, and mostly at the end, I realized that because the regulations go first, then GFSI, all of the GFSI standards, they start by saying, guys, make sure that the company is in full compliance with all of the regulations applicable to the products and the processes being performed.
Mm-hmm.
And remember that if you go to any of the GFSI standards, in the introductory section, the code, any code, is going to tell you this code was designed to help people to comply with the regulations applicable to you. So, auditing SQF, BRC, FSSC, IFS, or any GFSI standard, if you do not know the laws and the regulation of the country of manufacture and the country of sale, you cannot audit, basically.
Yep. Yep. And so I think Duncan is reflecting back kind of what we're saying about. So part of this, right, is this is a question that comes up all the time, right, with GFSI, SQF standards type things like this is, okay, if I'm compliant with SQF, am I compliant with FDA? No,
Nope.
you are not. There's differences. And the reason for that is FDA and the US regulations are US regulations. They aren't Canada, they aren't Mexico, they aren't Indonesia. And so the standards, ISO, GFSI, doesn't matter, whatever, are written internationally. They have to address everything, right?
Yes.
So codex and all these types of things. So always remember that, right? You need to understand the rules of the game. So with that, right? So part of this conversation, part of what we're talking about here today is you need to think like FDA or whoever it is that you're dealing with, right? And you need to picture yourself as that district director. And you're sitting at your desk and going, okay, time to set up Q3 and my audits and my concerns. What am I worried about? What are those food safety threats out there that are causing me the most grief? What do I need to focus on? What are the routine things I need to do? And what are the special cause things that I need to do, right? An example of that, and we'll talk about this here in a bit, right? Oh my goodness, what's going on with infant formula right now, right? Salmonella and Coronabacter, right? If you're at FDA, is that high on your list? Oh, yeah. Right?
Oh, yes.
And so you have reserve capacity in your district to go out and deal with emergencies like that.
Yeah.
So you can bet at that manufacturer, there's a lot of FDA people there.
Yep.
So one of the first things that I do when I am investigating and trying to figure out what FDA is up to is I use this website. I'm going to put this here in the post for everybody. And shout out to Sean Stevens at the Food Industry Council. He put this together, and this is an amazing tool. Amazing. As we all know, if anybody has done this work, is trying to research recalls and observations and things of this nature on FDA's websites, not very easy.
No,
Sean has done a great job of putting together this website. So foodindustrycouncil.com/recalls, where you can go and look at the most current recalls. And he updates this, and his team updates this every day. And the data we're looking at is 2 days old, and it's already, we have new recalls, right? So you have to keep up on this stuff. So definitely go check out that site. So that's the first thing that I do is look at that. And then the next thing I do is I look at the data in comparison with FDA. So I'm going to pull up here a Excel file that I put together to look at these things, right? So everybody should see this now. And so I put this together. It took me 15 minutes to put this together. If you would like a copy of this, happy to send it to you. Just let Renee know, and he will get you a copy of this. Happy to share this. So I have this divided into two tabs, 2021 observations and 2022 recalls. Now, part of what people may not necessarily know is that FDA does not operate on a calendar year. Their year is Q4 of prior through Q3. And so a lot of times when you see FDA objectives and things like this, they're out of sync with the calendar. But recalls are still reported annually. So keep that in mind when you're looking at these things, because sometimes you'll see a mismatch between FDA numbers and what you're seeing, and that's probably why. So with that, here are the 2021 observations from FDA. And so what's important here is kind of taking the Pareto rule into account here and say, okay, what are the biggies? What are these things that FDA is looking at? And I found this data by going and doing a Google search for FDA observations. And then I was able to download this data and then start playing with it. And what's cool about this, right, is they actually list, right, the actual reference here, Jose, from the Code of Federal Regulations and what law they are citing. Because again, back to your point, FDA needs to cite the regulatory authority that they're looking at for your products, right? And again, to your point, Jose, which you're great at bringing up, is it all comes back to adulteration and misbranding, right? Those are the two things that you need to look at. And look at this. Number one, you did not develop a foreign supplier verification program. 796 observations in 2021.
Yes.
FDA has been telling us for a few years now that we are going to focus on foreign supplier verification. Now, part of this is because FDA is able to do this remotely. So,
well,
go ahead, Jose. Sorry.
Look at this, Bryan. Yes, I agree with you. The way that regulation was written and the way that the Office of Regulatory Affairs has availability to go through this is, I mean, we can do this remotely, which is something that is not that easily available to the others.
Yes. So FDA cross-references their Customs and Border Protection inbound shipments that are registered with FSMA, right, which is separate than the importation process. Remember that. And they actually call companies, right? Something they can do during coronavirus. Hi, Mr. Saval, I understand that you are the PCQI for the facility. Yes, I am. We are reviewing foreign supplier verification processes and procedures. We would like you to send to us your documentation for this material that came in.
Yes. Yes. And by the way, Bryan, I'm not going to be the PCQI. I'm going to be the FSVP QI.
Good point. Good point.
Because that is the person that is qualified to do the requirements, require under 1.500, whatever, for a supply verification.
Yep. And this is something too. This is where the reference here in column D comes in very handy. Is FSMA is under 21 CFR 117.
Yes.
FSVP is under 21 CFR 1.5.
Okay, so 117 is the preventive control for human food, which is a FSMA rule. Yes. And 1.500, which is the FSVP, is also part of the FSMA.
Yep. Austin asked a question here. Why is FSB something that so many companies haven't created? I think a lot of people don't know, right? You don't know what you don't know. They don't realize that they're not in compliance. They may be listed as the importer of record and not even know it. Right? Yeah. So you need to clarify that. I'm working with a customer right now, and so I have a customer who is starting to purchase product from a company in Norway and doing a branding agreement with them on that product. And so that was one of the first questions we started asking on our initial conversations with this new supplier is FSVP. How do you guys handle that? Are you the importer of record, or do you expect us to be the importer of record? Very important, right? So I think, Austin, to your point, a lot of people don't understand that and know that they have to do that.
And one of the things that, anyone that is importing should be at this point attending to the FSVP class, highly recommended, and of course following everything that is there.
Yes.
But Bryan, I know that the definition, exactly the same as the definition for the PCQI, is, well, you may have the experience or the knowledge that is necessary to apply all of these concepts. But you know what? Unless you are a lawyer and then you also have food safety background and then you read that, my goodness, if you don't take the class, you are not going to know the basics.
Yes, and a little bit of a shout out here. Of course, Jose is an amazing trainer, one of the best I know. You teach FSVP, right?
Yes. Yeah, actually, I just taught one Monday and Tuesday, and I will be teaching another one Monday and Tuesday of next week.
Nice.
But you know what? I also have another comment.
Yes.
Because I believe that it was Jessica is already covering my comments, but it says that GFSI is customer oriented, and it says they audit to protect the customer selling your product. FDA has a job to protect the consumer. Well, the customer or the consumer, this is just different language to say the same thing. Because at the end, what is important is to look at the prohibited acts in the law. And the law says that any company, to protect customer or consumers, it doesn't matter, you cannot ship any product that is adulterated or misbranded, period.
Period.
So GFSI, you know what? GFSI is under the scope of the FDA.
Yep.
You must be full compliant with FDA, and then you comply with GFSI.
Yep. You can't do it the other way around.
Yes.
So FSVP, huge. And you look at that clearly, right? Number one, 796. The next closest is 88.
88, 10%.
But what's interesting is I said, okay, well, let's take a look at the top 10. So in column H here, the numbers that you see in red, I'm like, oh, well, look at this. This one here also is dealing with FSVP, and so is this one, and so is this one, right? You don't have written procedures for your imported foods. You have not established written procedures for ensuring that you have appropriate FSVP activities. You add all those up, out of the top 10, 73%, Jose, are FSVP related.
Bryan, I did the same thing that you did, but with the first 20. And out of the first 20, I have my graph here. 50% of the first 20 is FSVP.
Yeah.
50% of all of the inspectional observations by regulation is FSVP.
So if I'm a company that falls under the requirements of FSVP, which you need to make sure whether you do or don't, there's a 3 out of 4 chance, right? 75% that FDA is focusing on that for observations. Are they going to be asking me FSVP questions? 100%.
Oh, yeah.
100%. You need to be ready for that. And you need to dig into your company to figure out, are we ready for that? Odds are, based on this, most companies, no, you are not, right?
And you know what, Bryan? Those 796 companies that received that 483 saying that you do not have a FSVP developed, they also receive a warning letter because that is a major nonconformity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when you're looking at this, clearly that's a problem. When you look at the other stuff, what's going on here? Pest control, right? And if you haven't heard about the issue that's currently going on with Dollar Tree or Dollar Store and their warehouse, oh my goodness, right? Essentially, right, yeah. Massive infestation. FDA has said, bring back everything that came out from this facility. It's so bad, right? So is pest control important? Oh, yeah, it is, yeah. Right? 88 observations around pest control under 11735. Next one, you did not conduct operations under conditions and control necessary to minimize the potential for growth of microorganisms, allergen cross-contact, or contamination of food, deterioration of food, specifically, right? So failures in your programs. Your hazard analysis did not identify a known or reasonably foreseeable hazard, right? So FDA looked at your food safety plan and you were missing stuff. So let's say you had chocolate as an ingredient and you didn't identify salmonella as a potential risk, right? Things like that. You did not have a written hazard analysis. Oh, yeah. That's the backbone of your food safety plan. And don't forget, you need to cite your references on why you came to that conclusion. You just can't say because I know it. FDA wants to see your sources. You did not maintain your plant in a clean or sanitary condition. Specifically, right? So again, remember FDA, how they do audits, right? Most of their audits are GMP audits, right? They're going in, they're observing. That next level then is the food safety audit, right? Where they're looking at your plan and really digging into your systems. And you may be getting a swabathon as a result. Right? So looking at this data, right, you can draw some definite conclusions on what FDA is worried about, therefore what you should be worried about. So then you can take a look at that and then look at the recalls. And so this tab
hold on, Bryan. Let me interrupt you.
Sorry.
Let me interrupt you for a second, okay? Before we move into the audits.
Yes.
I'm going to add a few things
Please.
That were observations that I found this year. I kept going through the entire list, not in detail, but I kept going through that. And look at what I found. 39 inspections raised a violation against 117.4, which you know what that is? Training of the employees. I have never seen that before. Now look at this other one. On companies that are required to follow 112, the product safety rule, not having an environmental monitoring program at the packing house was a concern. Against 1.221, companies that are not registered, and they should be registered, they receive warning letters.
So they didn't even register their facility with FDA?
Yes.
Whoa.
And they were processing food.
Whoa. That's huge.
The food safety plan in 117, 126, the food safety plan was not developed by a PCQI. Remember that the PCQI is the only person, the only individual that can develop and implement a food safety system. And by the way, verify and validate that food safety system. And there is 1-2 reports about, remember that now when you are processing food, and if you ship that food with a hazard, there is a disclosure. There is a
yes, you have to disclose it. Yes.
A written assurance that must be provided to your customer saying, watch out, because my product may contain this hazard, whatever that is, salmonella, listeria, or a chemical. And you are and the expectation is that you receive a letter back saying, don't worry, we have the control over that hazard. Well, the FDA is already auditing against those minimum and tiny details of the regulation.
Interesting. Yeah, because FDA, when the written assurance first came out, there was a whole lot of questions back from industry on how that would be executed. And so FDA kind of pulled back on that, but it didn't go away. Right? So you need to be worried about that.
Yep.
Okay. Any other comments on the observations, Jose?
Oh, no, that's it.
Okay. All right. So then you can use the observational information and look at the end result of that, recalls, right? Yes. So year in, year out, I like to think of recalls in kind of 4 main buckets, right? So you've got your microbiological, chemical, and physical, right? Your 3 main categories from your food safety plan. What micro threats, what chemical, and what physical threats are FDA looking at? And year in and year out, Listeria, Salmonella, allergens, and foreign material dominate the list, right? So using Sean Stevens' site that I listed earlier, right, at the Food Industry Council, I went through and pulled up the most recent recalls here in 2022. This is just 2022. And I looked at it this morning. There's more. There's 2 or 3 more recalls under micro, right? And so you can then look at this and say, all right, what's going on? We've already had 37 recalls this year, right? Of those, so here's the Listeria recalls. Here's my Salmonella recalls. Look at all the allergen recalls. 21 of the 37 are for allergens and foreign material. And something that I love to beat on, and I will continue to beat on this until I retire or I'm dead, is for foreign material, it's just not metal, right? More than half of foreign material recalls are for non-metal, and you see it here, plastic. Here's that rodent activity again from Dollar Tree. Glass, plastic, right? Metal is only one on this list. So make sure and take that into consideration. So then what you can do is look at these and start analyzing these and saying, okay, enoki mushrooms, man, have we seen a lot of activity around enoki mushrooms this year, right? It's clearly showing up as a threat. And everybody loves enoki mushrooms in your miso soup or things like this, right? They're really, really good. But we can clearly see that there's a big threat with Listeria, because this is not just coming from one company, right? This is coming from different companies.
Yes.
So mushrooms are grown, generally, it's not cost effective to import mushrooms in most cases. So are they growing these? Probably. Now, part of this, right, is we don't have insider information necessarily from these companies. We have to kind of do some work and some inference to figure out what's going on here, right? And reading through the information. And what's nice about the recall site with the Food Industry Council is they link back to the actual documentation from FDA. So you can then read what's going on with these issues. So for example, the Royal Ice Cream Company. So this recall started out because FDA did some environmental monitoring and found listeria in the environment. And they then issued a recall for products associated with that. No product, no food contact, environmental. FDA then went in and did an investigation and expanded their recall. And Royal Ice Cream ended up having to recall everything that they manufactured because FDA went in presumptively, right? I'm guessing, I want to make that clear. This is me using my experience and knowledge to then extrapolate to figure out what's likely. FDA went in and found things that they didn't like, right? So they made them recall everything.
And you know what? If you, just by looking at that Excel spreadsheet, I may say, again, guessing, Bryan, but a good guess is that all of those products exposed to or potentially containing Listeria monocytogenes is from the environment.
Yeah.
Okay, so where is the hazard? It's an environmental hazard. Where are your controls? How effective are your controls? Show me the validation of your cleaning procedures. Where are your sanitation preventive controls? Yep. Because if you try to use GFSI and try to focus everything according to HACCP, you will never have sanitation preventive controls because it's a different approach. And that is the problem that people is having. Right. They do not know how to connect the 7 principles of the HACCP technique with a system.
Yes. And what's really important with ice cream to remember is you make the base mix for ice cream and you pasteurize it and it's clean and pathogens have been, reduced, all these type of things. And then you add in all kinds of ingredients post pasteurization, right? So you've got maple, you've got sweet scoop, whatever. You're adding all these things in, right? So your supplier program and your supplier preventive controls in ice cream, oh man, super, super important, right? So that needs to be understood very clearly. So you can pull some lessons out of that. That's the purpose of this, right? It's not the specifics of what we're talking about. It's the process that you need to understand, right? And use that to predict. So for salmonella, right? So we have the Dollar Tree with the activities around the quality issues and salmonella and yikes, right? All kinds of stuff going on there. Of course, with Abbott Labs, what's going on right now with Coronabacter, Sakazaki, and salmonella, huge, right? We're going to see a whole lot more information about that. And I read yesterday too, Jose, that 2 infants have died now as a result of this, which is just terrible, terrible. Flour, right? Flour has been an ongoing issue. And flour, it's a base ingredient that goes in all kinds of stuff.
Yep.
Allergens, right? In most cases, I'll continue to argue this, right? Is that in most cases, allergens are not, in most cases, related to failures in cleaning. It's related to failures in labeling, right? Getting the wrong label on the wrong product, not stating the label correctly, having bad changeover processes, these type of things. Pay very close attention to your allergen processes. Super important.
Yes.
And then, of course, we talked about foreign material, right? So looking at your foreign material and then saying, okay, I have my metal controls. What about everything else? How am I making sure that those parts are in place? How do I make sure? There's nothing more embarrassing than having a Lexan machine guard that's cracked because the operators are opening and closing it all the time, and there's a piece missing, and having FDA or SQF or whoever look at that and say, hey, I see there's a piece missing on this shield. Where is it?
Yeah.
And if you don't have a good answer,
good question.
You could have some things to look about, right? So this is all about 80-20, right? Is looking at this and saying, Jose, I have limited time, just like FDA, I have limited resources. What should I be focusing on?
Yeah.
And I need to seriously look at what FDA is focusing on so that I can minimize risk for my company and use that information to help educate the organization, right?
Yeah.
And looking at FSVP and saying, whoa, okay, we need to really look closely at this. How is this being managed? Who is doing this? Who's the importer of record? How are we managing this? How are we looking at evaluation of hazards? Who is making sure that these suppliers have the right preventive controls? Who's managing those? Do I need a letter associated with that if there's a hazard that I need to control? Right?
Yeah.
Super important that you understand these things. Right?
And not only that, Brian, having a very good understanding of any of the hazards that the company is actually controlling and which are exactly the control for each and every single hazard, that should be part of the communication channel that is part of your food safety culture. Because in the GFSI white paper about culture, one of the topics is that we need to inform about hazards and risk to anyone that is related with the control of those.
Yes, exactly. So, for example, my background's dairy, and Helen's is as well. So, thank you for the thumbs up on my ice cream observations. So, if you're in a dairy plant, a lot of times you have misbalances of raw materials, and so when you're producing milk products, the American public doesn't want a lot of fat. So you're skimming off the fat from a lot of the products, and well, now you got all this extra cream. What do you do with it? Right? You send it off to an ice cream company, right? Where all that fat ends up and where it's super awesome. But that cream is loaded into a tanker and it hasn't been pasteurized, right? It's separated prior to pasteurization.
Yes.
The microbiological risks from the raw milk have not been removed. If anything, they'd probably be concentrated in the cream. You need to let that purchasing company know that that hazard is not controlled.
Yes, of course.
That's written.
That is part of the assurances. The
Yep,
written
absolutely.
assurance. Yes.
So bringing this back up to the 30,000 foot level, right? You, in some ways, Jose, you need to be a predictor, right? You need to look at the future and you need to say, I may not know what's going to happen, to Duncan's point earlier, but I know a general trend, right? I need to look at those and prepare. Right.
Yep.
And it needs to be done, as we talked about, because you have many different masters in this situation. You have government, you have third-party auditors, you have customers, you have consumers, all these different people, and you need to keep ahead of all of this. Right.
Yes.
And in quality assurance, we're part of that group. And in food safety, right, we're scanning the horizon. We're looking for the icebergs. Right. We want to make sure that we're taking that ship around those, right? So we don't end up with a disaster.
Yes.
And that's part of the challenge of what we do as well, is that we may help to avoid those situations. And now we've prevented something from happening, right? A lot of times that's hard to see, right? And so you need to make sure that the organization understands that as well.
Of course. Of course. Yeah.
So let's see any other questions we missed here before we end up. Let's see. So John had an observation. I feel that the entrepreneurial space in food is so hot right now that there are many food startups that are operating without really understanding food safety requirements. Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Right. When you're starting up a food company, you've got a whiz bang cool idea for a new product, right? Your goal is to make that product and get it going, right? Your whole cash flow is to that end. Right? And a lot of times the person doing that is an entrepreneur. Yeah. And the entrepreneurial skill set is not what's needed to run a company, right? Which is why a lot of times you'll see the entrepreneur will step aside and hire a CEO so that they can run the company, right? And then start developing these. And that's a delicate time for companies. And I help companies, I know Jose does as well too, to help them understand that they can't ignore that, right? You're not going to grow your business if you're making your customers sick. I don't care how good your brand new pickle, broth, chocolate covered, whatever is, if you're making your consumer sick, you're going to be out of business really quick.
Yes. Yep.
So that has to be your priority. Right?
Yes.
And the organization needs to understand that. John, that's a very good point. Shanul, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Are you recording this webinar so we can listen to it later? I missed some parts. Yes, we do. And if you contact Renee, he can get you a copy of that. And also, if you notice on the LinkedIn feed, it also replays on there as well too. So
yes.
you can rewatch that too. So again, our goal here is to get this information out there around food safety as far as we can. And thank you, Duncan. Appreciate it very much. And so that, of course, wow, we're already coming up on an hour.
Time flies.
Wow. So these things go by so fast, and we always like to stay on time. So we're going to end up here today. And thank you, Martin. Appreciate it. We are back here every Friday. So we bring up a different topic, and I bring in different guests with different expertise, and we talk about different subjects. And so part of that is let us know, right? Our emails are here, right? Send us an email. Let Renee know, what topic would you like us to talk about that we haven't covered? Maybe there's a specific area you would like us to dig into. We'd love to do that. So please, right? We do this to have this interaction. It's an absolute blast. And we're so happy that you're here and joining on this. So thank you. And again, we appreciate your commitment to food safety. So with that, we hope to see you back here next Friday at the same time. So 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, or wherever in the world you may be, and join us for the food safety chat. So again, Jose, thank you, my friend. Always a pleasure having you on.
It's a pleasure, Bryan.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we will see you next week.
Okay.
Bye.